When it comes to nuclear escalation, we never started this rhetoric. We simply said it should be taken more seriously, and they immediately started talking about us brandishing nuclear weapons. We are not. That's the first thing. Secondly, on the use and non-use of such weapons, Russia has a nuclear doctrine and everything is written there. Their use is possible in an exceptional case, in the event of a threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country. I do not believe that such a case has arisen, but this doctrine is a living instrument, and we are closely watching what is happening in the world and around us, and we do not rule out making some changes to this doctrine. This is also related to the Nuclear Weapons Test Ban Treaty. We once not only signed it, but also ratified it. The Americans also signed it, but did not ratify it. So in today's circumstances, we have withdrawn our ratification. If necessary, we will conduct tests. For now, there is no such need because our information capabilities, computer capabilities, allow us to keep everything up to date.
Well, you listen to the White House, Downing Street, pretty much all of the Western media, and you would believe that Vladimir Putin, sitting in the Kremlin, is plotting a nuclear Armageddon. In recent weeks, talk about these end-of-the-world weapons have really reached fever pitch. So it is unsurprising that the topic was raised at the St. Petersburg Forum with the Russian leader for the umpteenth time. They're stating very clear, setting the record straight. Moscow has no intention of deploying nuclear weapons. And for critics who might not take him at his word, okay, well then let's just look at some of the facts. Let's take a moment to compare Russian and Western commitment to nuclear deterrence over the years. Yes, Russia does have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, but in 2002, Washington pulled out of the ABM Treaty. In 2019, Washington pulled out of the INF Treaty. In 2020, Washington pulled out of the Open Skies Treaty, and in 2023, Washington said that it will no longer share nuclear arms data with Moscow as per the terms of the New START Treaty. And we're also hearing now that they're casting doubt about the future of that document as well. And it's Washington which is now saying things like this.
We may reach a point in the coming years where an increase from current deployed numbers is required. If that day does come, it will result from a determination that more nuclear weapons are required to deter our adversaries and protect the American people and our allies and partners. We need to persuade our adversaries that managing rivalry through arms control is preferable to unrestrained competition across domains.
Successive US administrations can trample on nuclear arms control treaties. The US can diversify, as we heard, and potentially boost its arsenal and frame it as just being competitive. But Russia is somehow the one who's holding the world to atomic ransom. And I can't help but just remind what we all know of one thing. There is only one country in all the world, in all human history, which has actually deployed the atomic bomb. The US in Japan in 1945, twice. Almost 250,000 people, largely civilians, were killed to send a strong signal to the Soviet Union about American might. So really, any attempts to portray Russia as a global risk in this regard should be comical to anyone who knows even a page of history. We do seem to be entering a particularly hot phase in the war in Ukraine. Ukrainians are dying in their thousands, and the clearest evidence of that is that Kiev is literally dragging its men off the streets to feed the front. That front line is daily moving in Russia's favor, and the West is faced with this reality that its money, its weapons, its support, that has all failed to secure and deliver the victory that it promised, not just the Ukrainian people, but its own people. But its sanctions, in the meantime, have managed to deteriorate their economy, bring about huge multipolarity and de-dollarization. So to distract from this failure, they resort to fear-mongering. And of course, like you said, there is no greater fear than the end of the world. Vladimir Putin seems to have taken it upon himself to expose this, to debunk the narrative that is being spun out. But I think there is definitely a sense that these words were a reiteration of red lines. He said at that session that our nuclear doctrine is very clear. No nukes unless we face an existential threat, unless Russia is under attack, unlike, of course, the US, which has a first strike policy. The reality, though, is that Russia might well come under attack from Western weapons. Plus, on top of that, you have a player in the region, Poland, which is engaging in very dangerous talk about arming up and borrowing nukes from America.
Russia is increasingly militarizing the Kaliningrad region. Recently, it has been relocating its nuclear weapons to Belarus. If our allies decide to deploy nuclear weapons as part of a nuclear sharing on our territory as well, in order to strengthen the security of NATO's eastern flank, we're ready for it.
So it's hard not to see both these moves as escalatory and provocative. But that really is the backdrop that we have to look at all of this against. Now, there is, of course, a frustrated West, which is losing control, which is ramping up rhetoric, which is ramping up the conflict, and which is really driving this irresponsible talk about a nuclear conflict. Then we have Moscow and Vladimir Putin, who's calling on calm heads to prevail, but also just reminding NATO and co that Russia, like anyone else, does have a right to defend itself. The question, of course, is whether those increasingly reckless politicians in Brussels, London, and Washington will take heed of this warning.